And thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Apply to the 2025 CDRLF Grant Round. My name is Allie Lamberski, and I am the Credit Union Training Coordinator here with the Office of Credit Union Resources and Expansion at the NCUA, and I will be your moderator for today's pre-recorded webinar. Before we begin, I have a disclaimer that I must read out to you. The materials presented in this webinar are intended as an informative and educational summary of general information on applying for the Community Development Revolving Loan Fund. The NCUA has taken reasonable measures to ensure the quality of the data and other information produced by the NCUA that's available in this presentation. The NCUA, however, makes no warranty, expressed or implied, nor assumes any legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, correctness, or completeness of any information that's available through this presentation, nor represents that its use would not infringe on privately owned rights. The slides are intended for educational and discussion purposes and do not constitute legal advice, nor replace independent professional judgments. Reference to any specific commercial product, process, or service by trade name, trademark, manufacturer, or otherwise does not constitute an endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by the U.S. government or the NCUA. This is our agenda for today's webinar. In just a few moments, I will introduce today's speakers and then turn the program over to the Grants and Loans team to begin today's program on information regarding the 2025 CDRLF Grant Round. Following the presentation, we will review some of the frequently asked questions we would expect to see this grant round, and then finally close out today's webinar with some final announcements and review our contact information. Joining us today are Josh Krantz and Jimmy Curtis, who are members of our Grants and Loans team, here to discuss the application in detail. Jimmy Curtis is currently the Grants Management Specialist for the Community Development Revolving Loan Fund. Prior to joining the NCUA, Jimmy worked with multiple federal agencies working with grant programs, including the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. Department of Labor. Josh Krantz is currently the Program Manager of the Community Development Revolving Loan Fund, and he has previously worked on federal grant programs at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. Now, through the Community Development Revolving Loan Fund, the Grants and Loans team provides low-income designated credit unions with technical grants and loans to build their capacity and research and reach underserved communities. I am very excited to welcome Josh and Jimmy for today's program, and I will turn it over to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this important webinar on how to apply for the 2025 CDRLF Grant Round administered by the NCUA. Before we talk about which applicants are eligible to apply and the types of grant initiatives available this year, we would like to provide a general overview of the CDRLF grant program. When we refer to specific grant initiatives, like the Training Grant Initiative or the Underserved Outreach Grant Initiative, please note that each initiative is essentially just a category or type of 2025 CDRLF grant with individual characteristics. First, the purpose of the CDRLF program is to assist low-income designated credit unions to provide basic financial services to their members and stimulate economic activities in their communities. Through the CDRLF program, the NCUA provides financial support through technical assistance grants to eligible credit unions to accomplish the following goals: help eligible credit unions modernize their operations, build their internal capacity, and extend their outreach into underserved communities. These goals are met in the following three ways. First, through the award of CDRLF grants that are made available on an annual basis through congressional appropriation. Second, through low-interest loans that help eligible credit unions meet the evolving needs of their members and communities. And through newly chartered and urgent need grants that are used to either help newly chartered credit unions pay for certain startup activities or to help eligible credit unions pay for costs associated with disaster and emergency recovery efforts. Please note that all the information about this grant round that is being presented in this webinar can also be found in the NOFO and grant guidelines on our website. Next slide, please. Your credit union must be low income designated to apply to the 2025 CDRLF grants. While we don't provide a detailed review of the low-income designation process in this presentation, please note that to qualify as a low-income designated credit union, a majority of a credit union's membership must meet certain low-income thresholds based on data from the Census Bureau, in addition to requirements outlined in NCUA's rules and regulations. Please note that you can find more information about low-income designation on our NCUA low-income designation webpage and by emailing any questions to the DCA mail at NCUA email address that is listed on the next to last slide of this presentation. In addition to being a low-income designated credit union, your credit union must be registered in SAM.gov. Simply put, all organizations interested in doing business with the federal government, and that includes applying to grants, must register for a SAM.gov account. SAM.gov is an official website of the U.S. government with free registration. However, it may take a few weeks actually, to get registered after submitting all the required documents. We strongly recommend that you start the SAM.gov registration or renewal process if your organization was previously registered in SAM.gov as soon as possible. Back on June the 25th, we sent a SAM.gov reminder message to all low-income designated credit unions. So please glance at that message and direct any specific questions about the SAM.gov registration process to the Federal Service Desk by visiting fsd.gov. The Federal Service Desk has a live chat feature, telephone support, and helpful user guides to assist you. As noted on this slide, some initiatives have additional eligibility requirements, including asset caps, and we will highlight those specific initiatives' eligibility requirements later in this presentation. However, it is extremely important for you to review the entire Notice of Funding Opportunity that we'll refer to throughout this presentation as the NOFO, and the Grant Application Guidelines to ensure that your application meets all eligibility requirements. For example, applications must not contain comparative statistics or other demographical information about an individual or a group's race, ethnicity, sex, or national origin. Additionally, applications must adhere to all applicable regulations, executive orders, and authorizing statutes. It is very important for me to note that failure to adhere to all eligibility requirements will result in your application being rejected. The examples I provided just now are only a few of the eligibility requirements, so please be sure to review all eligibility requirements prior to applying. So now we're going to talk about what's new in this grant round. We are very excited to share that there are 3 new changes for this year's grant round. The changes expand the type of initiatives available, increase the number of applications that can be submitted by each applicant, and simplify the process of using existing grant information to then apply for a low-interest loan. So first, there are 3 new initiatives for this year's grant round. The first new initiative is the New Charter Capacity Building Initiative. The second one is the Student Internship Initiative. And the third one is the Technology, Cybersecurity, and Artificial Intelligence Initiative. The Technology, Cybersecurity, and Artificial Intelligence Initiative expanded on the Digital Services and Cybersecurity Initiative that you all are already probably familiar with. We will cover each initiative in the next few slides. Another change for this year's grant round is that each credit union can now apply for 2 separate initiatives. That's right, each eligible credit union is allowed to submit up to 2 applications, but each application submitted must be for a different initiative. For example, Credit Union ABC can submit an application for the Training Initiative and then submit another application for the Underserved Outreach Initiative. But Credit Union ABC would only receive 1 award if their application ranked high enough for a specific initiative to qualify for an award. Finally, we also added a grant to loan application conversion option for this year's grant round. The option essentially allows applicants to indicate whether they would like the NCUA to consider their grant project for a low-interest CDRLF loan if their grant is not approved due to a lack of available funding or some other reason. An applicant's decision to opt in and have their proposed grant project be considered for a loan will not affect the outcome of their grant application. I'll go ahead and turn this over to Josh now to discuss the initiatives.
Now we're ready to discuss each of the 2025 grant initiatives. First, let's start with the New Charter Capacity Building Initiative. This initiative has a maximum award amount of $50,000 and is for newly chartered credit union applicants to complete grant activities that help increase their capacity to grow and serve the needs of their members. Only credit unions that have been in operation for less than 10 years and have assets less than or equal to $10 million are eligible to apply. Some examples of activities that newly chartered credit union might use this grant for are to implement new products and services, complete strategic planning, and to receive mentoring and technical assistance from another credit union. Moving on, we will talk about the Technology, Cybersecurity, and Artificial Intelligence, or AI initiative. This initiative has a maximum award amount of $25,000 and is for applicants to enhance their protection against potential cyber attacks, upgrade their computer equipment, and implement products featuring AI services. Only credit unions that have assets of less than or equal to 250 million are eligible to apply. Some activities that a credit union might use this grant for are to implement mobile and online banking services, conduct IT cybersecurity testing, and implement AI services such as chatbots or other customer service activities. Next, we have the Student Internships Initiative. This initiative has a maximum award amount of $25,000 and is for applicants to implement a student internship program that enhances their ability to serve their members and communities. Only credit unions that have assets of less than or equal to 250 million are eligible to apply. Some activities that a credit union might use this grant for are to pay for a stipend or salary for a student intern, or purchase any equipment that that intern would need to perform its functional duties. Next slide, please. The training initiative has a maximum award amount of $25,000 and is for applicants to enroll board members, credit union executives, or employees in training courses that enhance leadership skills, operational knowledge, and consumer financial compliance. Activities completed for training initiatives could also focus on succession and continuity planning. Only credit unions that have assets of less than or equal to $1 million are eligible to apply. Finally, the Underserved Outreach Initiative has a maximum award amount of $50,000 and is for applicants that want to implement innovative outreach strategies to expand access to financial products and services in low-income communities. This initiative does not have an asset cap, so applicants at all asset levels can apply for this initiative. Some examples of activities that credit union might use this grant for are to develop new educational outreach materials, new financial products or services, or other project activities that could include developing marketing materials targeted at the low-income population that the applicant serves. Now I'll turn this over to Jimmy to cover the specifics on how to complete an application in cyber grants.
After you log into Cyber Grants, you will see this main welcome page that contains links to our website, frequently asked questions, W-9, and electronic funds transfer forms, and other instructional documents. Once you scroll down past the resource documents section, you will get to the CDRLF application section. This is where you can click on the link to apply to the 2025 CDRLF grant application. Earlier in this presentation, we talked about the need for all interested applicants to have an active SAM.gov registration. This page provides that guidance once more, and it is important to note that if you do not have an active SAM.gov registration, you will not be able to submit an application. So please keep this in mind and make sure that your registration in SAM.gov is active before you attempt to submit an application. If you have questions about SAM.gov registration or encounter issues trying to get your registration renewed or activated, please follow the guidance in the rest of this presentation about who you should reach out to. If your SAM registration is active, on this page you will enter your unique entity identifier, which is tied to your SAM.gov registration. Then you would click on Check UEI Value. Please note that for purposes of this demo, we are shielding the test UEI number that we are using. Once you click on Check UEI Value, this pings SAM.gov to see if your registration is active. It may take a moment, so please be patient as you work through this process. Once your UEI comes back as a valid UEI, you would then click Save and Proceed to get to the next section of this online application. On this contact page, you will choose a primary and secondary contact for your application by clicking on the checkbox names, on the checkboxes next to the names, or creating a new contact. Ultimately, the two individuals you choose should be prepared to respond to any questions we might have about your application or an eventual grant award. These two individuals you select as contacts will also receive email reminders and prompts from our grant system and from our grants and loans team. If you have to create a new contact, you would simply click on the Create New button, and on this page, you would fill out the information for each field. Salutation, first name, last name, title, telephone number, and email address. Then you would also select whether you want this individual to be the primary or secondary contact. Once you're done, you click Save and Proceed. You have to choose a primary and secondary contact, or else you will not be able to proceed. After you've done that, you would click on Save and Proceed. The next page is the organization information page that you check to make sure that all of your organization's information is indeed correct. So that includes your credit union name, address, tax ID number, as well as banking information, which is where you would like the CDRLF grant funds to be deposited. If there is a change to your credit union name or address, you will need to download, complete, and upload a W-9 form. If there are any changes to your banking information, you will need to submit an electronic funds transfer form. These forms are located in the Resources Documents section of the Welcome page that we showed just a little earlier. We are selecting No here because the contact information entered is accurate and up to date. Then we click on Save and Proceed. So first you will notice that the 2025 Grant Round, CDRLF Grant Round Application Guidelines, which is the document that contains a lot more detail about the grant round, it is hyperlinked at the top of this page. For purposes of this demo, I will select the Technology, Cybersecurity, and Artificial Intelligence Initiative, and I'll also indicate that is my first priority application selection, which we explained was a new option for this grant round. If I had previously submitted a training initiative application for this grant round as my first priority application, then I would have to select this particular application as my second priority. In any event, next I would enter my project title. Then I would enter the requested grant award amount. Please make sure as you're entering the requested grant award amount that the initiative you choose, you are selecting an award amount that is equal to or less than the maximum award amount for this initiative. Next, I would enter the estimated project start and end dates. And keep in mind when selecting start and end dates that awards will be made several months after you submit your application. Also, projects should take no more than 12 months. There are three main sections of the grant application form. The first is the identification of needs section, the second is the project plan section, and the third section is the outcome section. First, for the identification of needs section, select the appropriate choices for the credit union need, target community served, and community need. There are options for you to select based on the type of grant project you plan on implementing. For the credit union needs section, you can select one or multiple options that capture the needs that your project will address. For the target community served section, you should select the populations that will benefit directly from the project. For the community needs section, you should identify the challenges faced by the communities that the project proposes to serve. You can clearly see how this section demonstrates the needs of the credit union and the communities that this project will serve. For this project, the credit union's needs are to expand their outreach capability and improve their inadequate cybersecurity capabilities. The community that will benefit from this project is clearly identified as low-income individuals and unbanked or underbanked individuals. The community needs being addressed are lack of access to physical branch resources and lack of access to safe banking services. Now, moving on to the project plan section. This is the section where you will select the project activities that you plan to implement for your program. In this example, we are going to select the implementation of mobile online banking features project activity, and we'll also select the strengthen cybersecurity project activity. Both of those project activities, as you'll notice, are aligned with the needs that we selected in the identification of needs section above. After you have completed your project activities section, you should draft a clear and concise narrative that articulates and explains the plan your credit union has to implement the grant. The plan should connect back to the proposed project approach and how it will address the needs you've identified above. For example, we included the following narrative in the project plan text box. Grant funds will be used to procure an up-to-date firewall to ensure our credit union members' digital information is secure. The funds will also be used to implement a new mobile banking application to provide members with access to their credit union accounts without having to be physically present at the branch. One risk of the project is that members will be hesitant to adapt to online banking due to unfamiliarity with the technology. We will mitigate this risk by reaching out to our members with an informational campaign and providing technical assistance. So that's the example that we put in the project implementation text box. Later in this presentation, Josh will actually provide some good tips on what you should consider when drafting your project implementation plan. The next section is the budget. So in this section, you can add as many rows as you need. For each row, you would essentially enter the proposed budget line items for your project by selecting the project activity, a brief description of the actual expense, the total amount it will cost for that expense, and the portion of the expense that you would like to be covered by the grant. It's really important to note that the portion covered by the CDRLF grant amount, that particular field should not be more, the amount you put in that field should not be more than the total project expense amount for each one of the budget line items. So here we're adding one more row to enter an additional budget line item and to show that this is a different project activity. And also to show that the total estimated project cost of $20,000 is more than the portion that would be covered by the CDRLF grant. All right, so moving on, we go down to the project impact section. And this is a section where you want to make sure you describe the expected project outcomes. So the project impact section allows you to enter a narrative that explains how your project will benefit the target communities you selected for the project. For this example, we entered the following narrative. The firewall will ensure our members' financial information is safe, increasing the confidence the underbanked community has in our credit union. We expect this to drive membership. The new mobile application will be used by a significant portion of our membership who are not close to the main branch and therefore will increase their access to their accounts. We expect 250 members will use this service. In this next section, the impact metrics section, you should enter the target values, which are basically the expected values as a result of the project, for two applicable metrics like members served and membership growth. In this example, we are going to enter 100 for the membership growth and 250 for the number of members that will be served and benefit directly from this grant program. Again, the key is that you can clearly see how the proposed impact metrics align with the identification of needs section, as well as the project plan section. As we move down, the final section on this page is the grant to loan application conversion section. This section asks for you to indicate whether you're interested in having your project considered for a low interest CDRLF loan if your grant is not approved due to lack of available funding. Please note that indicating interest in this section in a CDRLF loan will not affect the decision to award this project as a grant, and it also does not commit your credit union to accepting a loan. The application here describes what the requirements would be to qualify for this process. For instance, this particular project would not qualify to be eligible that we are submitting this application for, would not qualify to be eligible for the grant to loan application conversion because the total project costs are only $35,000. And that is below the minimum total project cost of $50,000 to be considered for the application conversion. So that's why in this case, we would select no. Now, on to the final section of this application after we click Save and Proceed. On this final page, you will be able to access the grant terms and conditions, national policy requirements, and assurances documents. If you click on the link, it will open another tab in your browser and you'll have access to the PDF version of those documents. So as we go back to the application and you take the three documents together, here, all three of the links that are on the left-hand side, those three documents include all of the requirements associated with CDRLF federal grant funds that applicants must be aware of. After you finish reviewing each one of those three documents, you should click the checkbox certifying the terms above and entering the credit union official's name, title, and email address. So when you enter this information, you're basically saying that this is the individual who is authorized to certify compliance with all of those application requirements listed above and in the links. And this would also be the individual who's authorized to submit the application on behalf of your organization. This same person will be the one authorized and responsible for signing the award agreement if the application is approved. After you enter this information, you would click Save and Proceed. And this final page here is basically a preview of your application. So it reviews all the information already entered in the application. You can go back to any section in the application by clicking on the blue hyperlink of the application section hitting as we're doing right now. And after you review your entire application and make sure everything looks good and is accurate and ready to submit, you would actually go ahead and click on Submit. After you click Submit, you will see a confirmation of application receipt page, which has an application ID number. Please print this page for your records. As a reminder, it is always important to click Save and Proceed as you are moving through the different pages of your application. That will help ensure that you don't lose application information that you've already entered. Now let's go ahead and go back to the presentation.
Now that we've completed the demonstration of how to access and submit a 2025 CDRLF grant application, let's discuss how the applications will be evaluated. The scoring methodology is detailed in the application review process section of the 2025 grant application guidelines. The scoring rubric specifically details what we're looking for in applications and what needs to be included in the application to maximize your score. We strongly recommend that you review that section to understand how points are awarded based on previous CDRLF grant and loan program participation, asset size, and compliance with the previous CDRLF awards. Our evaluation process starts with an eligibility review to make sure that the applicant and the application meet all eligibility criteria. As we discussed before, we ensure that the applicant is low-income designated credit union and that it has an active SAM registration. We also make sure that the applicant's asset level aligns with the initiative that they applied for. Please note that if you have received a CDRLF grant in the past for a specific project, regardless of the initiative, make sure that your 2025 CDRLF grant application does not propose the same exact project and project activities. Applicants that propose these types of repeat grant projects may be rejected. Next slide. Since applicants can submit up to 2 applications this grant round, it is important to note up front that the NCUA will review all applications submitted. Applicants can submit up to 2 applications, but can only receive 1 award. Each application submitted must be for a different initiative. Applicants that submit 2 applications will be required to designate each application as either their first priority application or their second priority application. If an applicant fails to designate the priority of their 2 applications, the NCUA will use their discretion to designate the priority. If the first priority application is selected for funding, the applicant will only receive this award. However, if the first priority application is not selected for funding, the second application will be considered for funding. Applicants should spend time on their project implementation plan narrative and their project outcomes narrative. Ultimately, applicants want their applications to reflect that they have a clear plan to carry out the project while also demonstrating that the project will benefit their low-income population. The project budget should align with the project implementation plan so that the proposed project expenses are necessary to complete the project. In terms of project impact and outcomes, the project impact narrative should reflect the applicant's thinking about how the project will help accomplish their target impact metrics and why those metrics align with the project. On the next slide, I'll give an example of a clear and compelling narrative. Now, we'll take a look at an example of a narrative for a grant to improve a credit union's cybersecurity capabilities. The first sentence of this credit union's implementation plan plainly states what the grant funds will be used for. This illustrates an understanding of the steps needed to undertake this project. The last sentence identifies risks involved with the project and how the credit union plans to respond to these risks. By clearly stating these risks and a mitigation strategy, we can be confident that the credit union can successfully meet the objectives of the project, even when facing challenges. The impact narrative clearly identifies how the credit union will know that the project has been a success. The credit union also provided a list of deliverables that will result from the project. Since improved cybersecurity is not a tangible outcome that is easily measured, the credit union is demonstrating that the project was a success by holding training, testing, and will receive an assessment from a third-party vendor. Next slide. Here are a couple reminders of approaches to avoid when drafting your application narratives. Do not be vague. We appreciate and recommend applicants being concise in how they describe their project implementation plan and their proposed outcomes, but we need enough information to evaluate your application properly. As already noted, do not apply for a project which you have already received funding in the past. CDRLF grants are not intended to pay for ongoing or operational costs. Also, do not include any comparative statistics or other demographical information pertaining to an individual's or a group's race, ethnicity, sex, or national origin. Failure to follow this direction will result in your application being deemed ineligible. We strongly suggest that you use more general terminology to explain groups of people, such as underserved individuals, unbanked and underbanked individuals, and individuals within your field of membership. I'll now hand it back to Jimmy.
Thanks, Josh. So generally, credit unions must use their own grant funds upfront for the approved project according to the terms and conditions of the grant agreement. Then at the end of project implementation, credit unions request a reimbursement for the eligible project expenses. Credit unions must remember that there are two reports that have to be submitted at the end of the project: the grant payment request and the performance report. The payment request should be used to explain how much was spent and to provide proof of project completion documents in the forms of receipts, invoices, and screenshots of completed activities. Performance reports should provide an outcome that summarizes grant activities that have been completed, as well as impact metrics. For awards of $15,000 or greater, credit unions may request partial reimbursements throughout the performance period, though no more frequently than once a quarter. Additionally, credit unions with assets below $25 million may request payment in advance of incurring actual project costs so that they have the funds upfront to cover those costs. Advances must not exceed 25% of the total award amount at any given time. And credit unions must include a narrative with their within their payment request, detailing the activities that will be undertaken with the advance funds. Those credit unions then will have 90 days to spend those advance funds before submitting a performance report within 30 days that explains how they spent those advance funds. Next slide, please. All applications for the grant initiatives we discussed today can be submitted through the end of the grant period. The NCUA does offer funding that is available year-round. Our low-interest loans typically range from $250,000 to $500,000 and can have an up to 5-year payment term with the principal due as a balloon payment at the end of the term. The current interest rate is 1.5%, and loan awardees must make semi-annual interest payments every 6 months. Another one of the components of the CDRLF program are the newly chartered and urgent need grants. These grants with a maximum award amount of $15,000 are open year-round as well. Eligible credit unions within their first 10 years of operation can use newly chartered grants for many purposes. For example, the grants can be used to obtain hardware, software, or other resources that will assist the credit union in implementing financial services and products contained in their chartering business plan that was approved by the NCUA. Newly chartered credit unions can receive more than one newly chartered grant during its first 10 years of operation, but may only have one award open at a time. And the grant activities a credit union proposes have to be distinct and different for each newly chartered grant award that they request, which is similar to what we said about the initiatives earlier in the presentation. Urgent need grants can be used to provide financial support to help credit unions respond to unexpected emergencies, including natural disasters, to repair damage to credit unions that is not covered by insurance. Just like with the CDRLF loans, applicants who apply to the 2025 CDRLF grant round can still also apply for newly chartered and urgent need grants. However, any newly chartered or urgent need grant applications would need to be associated with a project that is distinct and different than the project that they are proposing for their 2025 grant round application. We strongly encourage any interested credit unions to review the newly chartered and urgent need grant guidelines on our NCUA grant webpage. So thank you so much for joining this webinar, and we'll go ahead and move over to questions and answers to make sure that we cover some of the most important questions about this year's grant round. Okay, so what happens if I apply for 2 different initiatives, and do I have to apply for 2 different initiatives? That's the first question. Again, what happens if I apply for 2 initiatives, and do I have to apply for 2 initiatives?
If you submit 2 applications, you must designate a priority for each, first or second. Your priority selection should be based on which project would provide the greatest benefit to your credit union. If the first priority application is selected for funding, the second priority application will not be funded. If the first priority application is not selected for funding, the NCUA will consider the second priority application for funding. You do not have to apply for 2 initiatives. You can just apply for one.
Perfect. Now on to the second question, Josh.
Will opting for the grant to loan application conversion affect how my grant is evaluated?
Oh, good question. So no, indicating interest in having your project be considered for a loan through the grant to loan application conversion option will not have any impact on how your grant application is evaluated. Since CDRLF grant funds are very limited, we are unable to fund many worthy applications. We developed the grant to loan application conversion as a way to make it easier for credit unions to apply for the additional resources available through the CDRLF low interest loan program. Thanks, Josh. Now back over to you, Ali, to discuss and provide some additional information about our office and our resources.
All right, thank you so much, Jimmy. While today's webinar is pre-recorded to ensure you have immediate access to the 2025 CDRLF grant round information as the application opens, I do want to remind everybody about our learning management system. So this webinar will not only be available just on the CDRLF webpage on ncua.gov, it will also be available on our learning management system. So 2 locations to be able to access this content. I imagine many of you may choose to access this webinar from the CDRLF webpage on ncua.gov, but if you choose to, once again, you can visit it through your learning management system account. And a copy of today's slides will also be available for your viewing. If you do not have an account, it is very easy to set up. There is no charge and is completely free for all credit union employees and volunteers. If you need to set up an account, I encourage you to go to ncua.gov/support services, then select Credit Union Resources and Expansion, and further select Learning. There you will be able to sign up for our learning management system. Alternatively, you can go directly to the sign up page by using the QR code that we have placed here. Just a quick reminder, after creating your account, please allow up to 24 hours for the learning material to generate. We do have over 200 courses available, so it does just take a little bit of time for everything to load. So this slide contains information referenced earlier in the presentation by Josh and Jimmy with our Office of Consumer Access. Here you will find the contact information regarding chartering credit unions, field of membership expansion, as well as any information for the low income designation. We have provided email addresses and phone number information, so please reach out to them with any of your questions. And finally, we have the contact information for the resources division, which is the office Josh, Jimmy, and I belong to. For more information regarding grants and loans, learning, the MDI designation, or general inquiries, please contact us using these email addresses or phone numbers provided. And before we finish, I would like to just take one moment to thank our support staff today, Franz, for technical support and assistance running the webinar. It is always wonderful to have him on board with us. And I also want to take a moment to thank Josh and Jimmy for the fantastic information for this year's grant round. And for our viewers, however you are choosing to watch this recording, thank you for your time and attendance. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.